Craig Button's list of prospect rankings came out today, and he has some people like Iginla very high, and not only him, we're hearing Iginla's name being linked to the Canadiens left and right. We're going to get into that, but despite that, the betting odds on FanDuel have another maybe surprising name sneaking in to the second most likely pick behind Lindstrom. That plus some impact of a trade that went down in the NHL today on the Montreal Canadiens coming up on this episode of Habs Digest. And before we get into the video, guys, I haven't done this in ages, but we want to see 800 likes on this video. That's right, 800. Last time we asked you guys for that, we got over 1,000. So if you guys could hit like right now, it help us out. It helps some other fans find some great Habs content. We'd really, really appreciate it. Jesse, let's jump into this. And I want to talk about the big JAcob Markstrom trade. Now, not purely reaction to the trade. Our opinions on that, well, it is what it is. We'll probably give those as we get to it. But this actually has some impact on Montreal. And as a lot of you guys know, Calgary traded away JAcob Markstrom at 31.25% retained to the New Jersey Devils for Kevin Ball and a first-round draft pick that's top 10 protected next year. Now, I think we're both of the opinion that this is a nice low-risk move by New Jersey. I think people are hating a bit too much on the return for Calgary. It's a guy with a $6 million a year contract with a no-movement clause. You get what you can get. We're not sure what you're going to get from Markstrom, but the big thing, Jesse, is this has an impact on Montreal because if Calgary finishes bottom 10 next year, I'm pretty sure that means Montreal is going to get Florida's first-round pick, which is probably going to be quite low. But not only that, as we know, Jake Allen, if he played 40 games next year for the Devils, the Habs' third-round pick would move up to a second that they got in that trade. Now, I know that whole Jake Allen thing was extremely unlikely from the start, but, it's just kind of interesting to see how these kind of trades affect Montreal. And not only that, these kind of trades of like a defenseman and some draft capital for an established player kind of leave some markings there for maybe what we can look forward to in the future from the Montreal Canadiens.
For sure. And I don't think that this affects us too much in a bad way because, you have to feel with Jake Allen, like, even though he was relied on heavily in New Jersey and played amazing hockey for them, in his part of his season last year when he was there, it's like, you have to feel obviously now, like, that with Markstrom being in there, that obviously, the chance of playing that 40 games was never high to begin with, right? But at the same time, you really got to feel like this is a good move, at least for New Jersey. This is exactly what they really, really needed. I think the Leafs, though, are still wishing that they made that trade for Allen.
Yeah, like you look at the return and it's like, I mean, it's not that much. I think a lot of teams could have afforded that. And yeah, while I know, for Jake Allen, either way, like both things, the price for both these trades, like they're not that much, right? So when you look at New Jersey, a team that's in a position to try and compete, what they ended up giving up for Allen was essentially nothing. And what they're giving up now for JAcob Markstrom is, I mean, it's not nothing. I mean, they gave up a first-round pick. That's never nothing. But when you're starting to turn in that competitive window, Jesse, and you can get these guys both retained, you have Markstrom and Allen as your tandem this year, combined for under $6 million when you take into account the retention. So really interesting move from New Jersey. I wonder if something like this is coming maybe in the next year or two for Montreal. We'll have to keep an eye out. But we're going to move on quickly to the other stuff. And I want to talk first about Beckett Sennecke, Jesse. There's a lot of talk about him, left, right, and center, but more recently, most of the talk has been centered on other guys, like Demidov, like Iginla. We'll get into a bit later. But FanDuel, we brought this up the other day, and we're not betting men ourselves. Maybe some of you are, not really sure. But they often have their heartbeat on what's going on around, right? A lot of people are betting, and so that's how they adjust their odds. Well, last time we talked about this, Demidov was number 2, Jesse, but guess who's now number 2? After Demidov put on this impressive, I don't know if I want to say performance, but this whole impressive camp there down in Florida, they're seemingly saying that he's more likely to go higher in the draft now, and Beckett Sennecke has slid in just barely below Cayden Lindstrom, plus 240, plus 260. This is a guy that I feel like we haven't been talking about nearly as much recently. While he does have a bunch of the upside, like, I feel like I'm surprised to see that, like, not only were those rumors starting that maybe the Habs could take him, and that kind of picked up, and now we're seeing the betting odds go there for Sennecke, even though there's not a lot of hype around him at this very moment. What do you make of this?
No disrespect, but God, I hope we get Demidov or
Oh, I
Lindstrom.
know.
But we really need to be prepared for these extra situations right now. We know Demidov, after this recent showing, I think rightfully is where he should have been this whole time, solidly in that top 3. Now, there is that good chance with Lindstrom, falling to us as well, right? But we got to be prepared if that's not the case. But Josh, I really believe the Montreal Canadiens are going to select a forward,
Oh, yeah.
even if Demidov or Lindstrom are selected already. I think something monumental needs to happen. The way that Kent Hughes wants that scoring forward, and and Jeff Gordon as well, right? I just feel like they're gonna go for a forward. I really feel that way. And for me, it's if Lindstrom, Demidov are gone, I'm thinking Iginla, I'm thinking Yzerman, and Sennecke as well. He falls in there for sure. Honorable mention to Kaiden, but I think those are the three guys that you got to look for right away if those two guys aren't available. So really interested to see. I think Sennecke, again, is a player that his play could translate really well for the type of team that we're looking to compete, not just in the regular season, but in the playoffs as well. So I could see that, even if that was being the case, it'd still be a good pick for this team.
Yeah, he's not bad. He has quite a high ceiling. The problem is, like, he almost might need some good line mates, but it was sort of the same case with Slav. Who knows? Sennecke is interesting. I would probably take some other guys over him, but I could totally see the Habs going for him. I can see why he's shooting up the rankings. There's a lot of very interesting storylines around Beckett Sennecke, and I want to hear from you guys. Like you mentioned, Jesse, if Lindstrom and Demidov are gone, which is a non-zero chance, who is the forward that you guys would want? I'm sure I'm going to see a lot of Iginla, but I want you to answer down below right now. We're going to get into what Craig Button had to say, but leave your comment before we get into that to see where he ranked some other top forwards. And what better time to just get into it than now, Jesse? This is insane. He calls it Craig's List, which is just fun to say. We're going to take a look at Craig's List here, guys. And look, I say insane. It's atypical. Craig Button has kind of his own rankings, and he's going to, like I've seen some people say, he's going to be right on a lot of these people, and people are going to be shocked, and he's also going to be very wrong, right? He's been high on some players that did really well, but he's also been low on some players that did really well. But we're going to start here by just showing you the list. Pause, take a look. It's kind of wild. He has Celebrini number 1, Ivan Demidov 2, Iginla at number 3, Zeev Boyum at 4, Cole Yzerman at 5. Now, this is also, I must let you guys know, this is a projection of 3 to 5 years from now, who he believes will have the most NHL impact. You see Lindstrom at 9. You see guys like Lev Shunov at 8. Salayev is down at 12. But the big thing, Jesse, I wanted to bring up was some of the quotes he had about Iginla, because I wanted to talk about him a bit first. He said, I've got that gnawing feeling that I'm underestimating Iginla, because Craig Button was on the Dallas Stars staff when they chose Jarome Iginla in the draft. He said he looks back at the notes he had on Jarome, and he said they're not the same thing, but they possess the same types of things, like massive effectiveness, massive substance, the ability to make things happen. He said, we drafted Jarome, and we really liked him, but he was so much better than we thought. And we thought he'd be a really good player, and I'm kind of caught up in the same boat with Tej. Now, I want to get into Yzerman, who he kind of has at number 5, and his ranking it a bit, just lines up with the Habs pick, but this Tej talk, Jesse, including Corey Proman and his full 7-round mock draft, kind of saying Tej is up there with some of the guys the Habs might select, the Habs taking him out to dinner. I'm starting to sell myself that this might actually be the pick.
Pedigree is a thing in the NHL. The way that this guy competes, the way that this guy's able to score goals, again, I think it's going to be a really enticing factor that Kent Hughes is going to have talks about internally, right? I think that those that believe that Iginla has a high potential and a long staying power in the NHL, I think that they're absolutely right on the money. I think that those are the type of guys that thrive. If you have that skill, but also that compete, it's really hard to kind of bet against that, right? Mm-hmm. So we're really seeing them rise up quite a bit right now. For me, though, the big thing, Iginla, like, obviously had an amazing season, scoring goals, but how good was he, Josh, at that U18s, right? Oh, yeah. Like, setting up clutch goals, scoring clutch goals. Like, his hockey IQ, I think, would be really appealing to Martin St. Louis. Probably an underrated factor. Like, he was really behind basically all of Team Canada's offense, really helping to carry, right? In a kind of an understated sort of way, but his effect was really there. So he really impressed me at that tournament, and he's just continuing to climb up as a result.
And there's a good reason for it, right? Like you said, the pedigree, but like when he's on the ice, he has this gravity, right? And it's hard to teach that. People have gravity when they're an impact player, and you just see impact when you see Iginla, and you also see a guy who's driven to get better, and a guy who has that family pedigree of improving, and just being a guy that you're like, oh my gosh, like there's never a moment that I don't want him on the ice. So really excited about Iginla. And like, if Lindstrom and Demidov are gone, or maybe if Demidov's gone and there are concerns about Lindstrom, I think my pick might have to be Tej now, and I think a lot of you guys would probably agree with that. But I wanted to talk a bit about Cole Yzerman too. Now, we talked a bit about him on the stream. We talked about him in some recent videos. And Craig Button has some interesting stuff to say, as he has him at number 5 in impact for the next few years. And he said Yzerman is actually the draft's most intriguing player. He has an elite skill. He's a player that I'm just fascinated to watch. He's a hard-working player. I think you're going to see a player that just settles in next year and doesn't feel that pressure and is just going to play. You're not getting him for defense. You're getting him for offense. And despite that, Cole Yzerman has had lots of quotes saying that he knows he needs to work on his defensive game. But Craig Button is just sometimes right. He likes to watch a lot of junior hockey. Yzerman is intriguing. His goal-scoring upside is very intriguing. Other similar prospects like him, like Wahlstrom, we're talking Kaliev, have not been able to put it together at the NHL level. Maybe Yzerman is different, especially since he really said he wants to work on his power forward style of game. But I think Craig Button sees something in him, Jesse, and we were talking about maybe the Habs trading up for him in the teens. I mean, there's no world they take him in the top 5, right? I mean, this might be a bit high, but I still think that, as much as I wasn't on the Yzerman train for such a long time, I think now I'm starting to come back around a little bit.
Hey, if Demidov or Lindstrom are taking, I think that Yzerman is one of the most skilled guys. Now, for sure, you need to balance that out. And the reason why that Craig has him so high is because he really believes that goal scoring is really going to be able to create a niche for him really in the NHL to really thrive. And obviously, we see a lot of the best players today are definitely goal scorers. You can definitely, the hockey game really revolves around that, begins and ends with goal scoring. There's other important things, but as Cole Yzerman has said, that's what really wins games, right? Like, there's some players, Josh, that are point per game players. But Cole Yzerman is exactly right. Ricky Bobby, not first and last. It's like there's some players that are point per game players. There's other players like Cole Yzerman. They're goals per game players. I'm calling 82 goals.
82 goals, baby.
Not this. I'm just joking around, right? But he did score 58 goals in 57 games. Last year. Like this is his bread and butter. This is what he does. And isn't it interesting to think about that? Like if Cole Yzerman was to come to Montreal, instantly there would be a rivalry with Cole Caufield, and the best type of rivalry of who could score the most goals. We know Cole Yzerman broke his record just last year, the goal scoring record for the U.S. national development team, right? Like you would just have that right away. And I do really hear when, Craig Button and others say like, this is the best goal scorer in this draft. That's high praise above Demidov, above Celebrini. But honestly, I see it. And for that reason, you just got to see, okay, if you have enough confidence in other parts of his game, there's just tremendous upside with this player.
Yeah, and look, if they can trade up to maybe in the teens and snag him, I think it's okay. I think 5 is still high for me. I just think there's other guys that could be very impactful, but hey, you never know, right? You just never know. And you got to take some long shots when you're making lists like this. Honestly, I respect it when people do that. Some people don't respect it. Some people think it's garbage, but hey, you know what? He's taking a gamble on Cole Yzerman being an amazing goal scorer. But what do you guys think? I mean, I don't think he's number 5, but leave your thoughts about Craig Button's list down below. Your thoughts on Yzerman, and if the Habs should maybe try and make a move to acquire him. That'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for everyone that shows support every single day. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.